I have the pleasure of introducing Brock Bierman, the president and CEO of Ukraine Focus. Brock founded Ukraine Focus in 2022 after Russia's formal invasion of Ukraine with the goal of procuring and donating ambulances to Ukraine's defenders. Ukraine Focus will also be conducting its 18th mission next week on August 1st and has a further mission coming up this October. I think Brock is a great example of what one person can achieve with the help of others if they set their mind to it. I'm a big fan of what he's done with Ukraine Focus. I'll be dropping a link here in the description below if anyone is interested in donating, supporting their cause, and helping Brock buy more ambulances. I had a great time sitting down with Brock. I hope you enjoy this interview. Brock, congratulations on Ukraine Focus's 17th successful aid run to Ukraine.
Thank you very much. It was a real success and our largest mission to date.
You had, I think, 60 volunteers on this mission?
We had 60 volunteers and delivered 51 vehicles, which included ambulances, pickup trucks, four-wheel drives, and three armored bank cars, which turned into ambulances because unfortunately the Russians are targeting ambulances. So we've actually delivered these. People see these squared off bank cars, I'm sure, around town delivering money, but we bought old ones and we took the stuff out the back and now they turn them into ambulances. So the TDF loves those and we'll be delivering more in our next mission coming up in August.
So this brings the total number of ambulances you've delivered to Ukraine. Is it close to 200 now?
No, it's over 400.
In fact, over 400.
Yeah, I think I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's going to be close to about 412 after this next mission. We keep track of all of the ambulances, where they go, who gets them, how long they're in service, as much as we can follow them. Some of that information is not shared with us for obvious reasons, but we do try to track them as much as we can. What I've been told is ambulances last anywhere between 60 and 90 days. But I recently was told one of our ambulances lasted 2 years, 28 months actually, before the engine gave out. So recently in the last mission, we delivered 51 vehicles and one engine, technically speaking. And that engine got another one of our old ambulances back on the road.
But this started out smaller, maybe more with people you had known, you had worked with, and now it's really ballooned into this international operation that you are organizing.
I called a friend of mine and I said, "Hey, I'd like to go into Ukraine." And so a couple of weeks later, I ended up walked across the border, and technically, I actually found a lady and her child who brought me across the border because I could only walk back. I couldn't. You couldn't walk over. You had to drive over. So I asked this one person if she wouldn't let me in her car, and she said fine. And we went across the border. And then in a lot 2003, I think it was 2003 or 2013 Lada, we drove like 2,000 miles all over Western Ukraine to find out what people needed. And, obviously they needed blankets and food and the stuff that you hear about when beginning of the war. But one thing I consistently heard was they needed ambulances. And so when I went home, I called a couple of friends of mine and I said, we supplied ambulances in the First World War. Can we buy a couple of ambulances? I bought three ambulances just kind of on a whim. And we ended up driving them in and I delivered them to Mykolaiv. First time I'd ever gotten shelled, which was an experience. They shot over our location and they shot short of our location. And then it was time to leave. And we delivered those ambulances. And then I got home and I told my story to some folks. In fact, Mike McCall, who's a congressman from Texas, you may or may not have ever heard of him. He's a friend of mine. And I was in his office telling him about all this stuff. And he put me in touch with this one guy who wrote us a check for 60 grand. And we went out and bought, 6 more ambulances. And then all of a sudden we had another organization write us a check for 100 grand. We bought 10 more. And after 6 months, we became a charity and we formed Ukraine Focus.
And here you are, 400 plus ambulances later.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
My grandfather was born in Moldova and he came to the United States in 1906. He became a citizen in 1913, joined the army in 1918, went back to France to fight as a doughboy, joined the Coast Artillery. And the first ambulances we delivered were to Coast Artillery in Odessa. So I thought it was destiny.
So you primarily work with Ukraine's territorial defense forces, the TDF. Why specifically them?
The reason we work The first and number one reason why we work with the Territorial Defense Force is because, well, first, to backtrack a little bit, the TDF was stood up right after the war. President Zelensky started the Territorial Defense Force in an effort to protect communities because at that point in the beginning of the war, they thought Ukraine was going to be invaded in the entire country. So basically, the call was to the local community. And so these men and women who are part of the Territorial Defense Force, for the most part, never served in the military, never held a weapon in their entire lives. They're lawyers and teachers, right? They're plumbers and carpenters. They're doctors and accountants, right? They come from all walks of life, men and women, 18 to 80. I've met incredible people along the way. They are true patriots. That is the number one reason why we help them. And they are also on the low end of the totem pole when it comes to resources, because obviously the professional military that is on the top of the budget. And these folks do a lot of behind the lines type of work, like the medical type of evacuations. And so they need the type of assistance that we are delivering. We're focused, but we also have a memorandum of understanding with General Plahuta, who is the commanding general of the Territorial Defense Force. And he provides us with the exact type of asset allocation that I'm looking for as a former member of the U.S. Agency for International Development. It was all about strategy, making sure that the asset goes to where it's needed most, right? We want to make sure that the ambulance goes to the unit that's most in need. And we, as a charity, should not be making that decision. The Ukrainians should be.
So you've been delivering to the TDF for 4 years now. The war has changed a little bit. Have the requests from the TDF changed at all?
Obviously we'd love to give them new ambulances. We can't because one, they cost too much, right? We pay $10,000 US plus or minus for an ambulance. That's just the cost of the ambulance. That's not the delivery of it. But at the end of the day, a new ambulance could cost 75 grand. So, we'd rather give them 10 really good used ambulances than one brand new ambulances that can get blown up the same way or destroyed, or the roads or whatever have you that cause the malfunctions for those ambulances. We provide them good used ambulances, and we have a check-in every time we meet with them to make sure that they're getting what they want. And they tell us, I mean, at one point they just said, hey, please don't bring any more box ambulances. Those, I'm sure you've seen the big box ambulances. So now we're either giving them the smaller they call dolphins. They're like minivans that are
Like
ambulances.
sprinter van types, right?
Or sprint. The sprinters are
Yeah.
bigger than the
Yeah.
dolphins, right? So
Okay.
the smaller ones are really compact, and they're all makes and models. They're Mercedes, they're VWs, they're Renaults, Fiats. I mean, we've delivered lots of different kinds of ambulances, but the size is what matters. And obviously the roads can't handle big, heavy box ambulances. So we stopped delivering those because they said, please don't send any more of those, and we stopped delivering those. You also asked about other vehicles. So they're always looking for four-wheel drive. And we try to buy them four-wheel drives because obviously the ambulance doesn't go into the front line, right? Can't make to the front line. But a four-wheel drive like a Range Rover or a Volkswagen or Mercedes or a truck, Ford or whatever have you, if we can get them one of those types of SUVs, we definitely will deliver to them because that's really how they pick up the soldiers. They'll put them in the back. They'll take them to behind the front lines, deliver them to the ambulance. Ambulance will take them to the next stage, right? So we bought them pickup trucks, four-wheel drive, and four-wheel drive SUVs.
So the ambulances you're delivering, what's in them? How are they outfitted?
So we give them the ambulance as we buy it, and probably 99% of those ambulances have just a gurney in them. Sometimes they'll have a fire extinguisher, or sometimes they'll have bandages that came with them, and we have to check to make sure that they're not expired, whatever have you, to make sure they meet the need. But the bottom line is usually they just come with a gurney. And then we hand them over. They're all really, really beautiful. I mean, the nice thing about the ambulances that we're buying, a lot of them from France and Germany, the French and German, whether it's the fire department or the EMTs or the healthcare companies, they take really, really good care of these things. And sometimes, they might have a couple of 100,000 kilometers on them, but like some of them look brand new. I mean, it's amazing how nice they really are. And, just like in the United States, you go by any fire department, they're always really taking good care of their fire engines and their equipment and their ambulances. And they do the same in Europe.
And as far as survivability goes for these ambulances, I know because they are getting targeted by drones. Is there anything that you can help supply or that they might be asking for that makes these ambulances like easier to outfit that might sort of increase their lifeline or their life on the in the field?
Yeah, by the way, we buy anti-drone units.
Hmm.
We do not buy or secure any offensive things. So all of ours is defense only. But we do have these anti-drone units that go on top of the ambulances that kind of ward away the drones, get them confused so that they either crash or go somewhere else. But basically, all of that's internal. We buy it internally to Ukraine because the best technology has been, as far as we're concerned, and at the reasonable price that they're asking for too, by the way. It's not a matter of us saying, hey, we can buy a cheap anti-drone unit in Ukraine. They're saying, hey, we would appreciate it if you have some resources to buy an anti-drone unit, buy it from this company in Ukraine because we really want it. And then we actually deliver it to that particular unit because that unit asked for that particular drone, anti-drone.
And those are mostly they have like the six antennas and it's kind of a brick and you can sort of put that on top of the ambulance and it sort of keeps that safe on the front lines.
Yeah, it's kind of like a big antenna. I mean, we've
Yeah.
posted a little bit. They're not it's not a secret. Don't ask me how they work, but the bottom line is that yeah, they have these little antennas that kind of spin and they confuse the drone to make it veer off or go away from where their position is.
And so has sourcing, especially the ideal ones from Europe, has sourcing become an issue? Have you had more luck with it as the program has gone on?
Yeah, I mean, look, over the course of 4 years, we've gotten a lot of exposure. Ukraine, the latest, which is the most highly listened to podcast on Ukraine, has featured us a number of times. The reporters have gone on our missions. They've seen how we deliver our ambulances. That has given us a lot of exposure and a lot of opportunity to buy ambulances. We have several people that actually live in Europe. And people reach out to us, but we have a professional used ambulance car dealer who knows that we're interested in buying kind of cheaper ambulances, not to be used in Europe, but to be taken to Ukraine. So he's always on the lookout for ambulances for us, and he's done a great job finding us really good, inexpensive ambulances.
Is there anything that you're still trying to get your hands on?
We did get a huge international ambulance. I don't know if you've ever seen these things. They're like an operating room on wheels, but they have literally a tractor trailer with a big box on back. And the Ukrainians really like that because those are like mobile operating rooms. Those aren't like any box truck. So anytime if anyone's listening, they can get me one of those. I'll take those for sure. You should know that the Volunteer Ambulance Corps, which is modeled after the American Field Service that delivered ambulances during the First World War, which is the model that we used, has been very successful. We utilize volunteers to deliver those ambulances. And we've had hundreds of volunteers over the course of 4 years that have helped us deliver. We couldn't do it without those volunteers. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars over the course of the 4 years. We haven't done all the math, but we looked at it last year, and it's like almost $500,000 worth of in-kind contribution in terms of time. They pay their own expenses. They pay their own hotel, their flight. And you think about 60 people paying for all that money to cover their own expenses. That's a lot of resource that doesn't show up on our 990 and doesn't reflect on our overhead.
Do you guys use any government grants?
We don't work with the government. One, it just, I don't know.
The U.S. government
Yeah,
is,
we don't work. We
yeah,
don't work, or any other for government for that matter.
yeah.
I just, we have a lot more independence, and we don't have to, from my perspective, jump through their hoops. You know, say what you will. Look, I worked at USAID. I worked at the U.S. Agency for International Development. And there's a lot of bureaucracy that goes behind that. We can't afford to buy new ambulances, and we don't want to go through the whole process of the bureaucracy that it takes, and the requirements that they would have for us to buy the stuff from where they want us to buy it or do whatever it is that they have us do. And then all of the time, just because there's money available doesn't mean you're going to get it tomorrow. And the Ukrainians don't need it tomorrow. They need it now, right? So I can't wait a year or 2 years out to go through this grant process. And by the way, we're a small organization. I don't have a lot of people, and that's not really our focus. Our focus is the private, basic private donations. Big NGOs have big overhead. I operate out of my office in my basement of my house. We have a donated space in Washington, D.C. that we use. We don't pay any rent. We don't pay any electricity. We basically are very frugal. When we go on these missions, we'll stay at, not the budget hotels, but we'll stay at a inexpensive hotel because, we're frugal. We want the money to go to get the ambulances to Ukraine. So we're really frugal about that. But also, we have other programs. We have a program to deliver containers. We've delivered 4 containers of medical supplies, and every container of medical supplies is anywhere between $300,000 and $500,000. And we work with Project Cure, that basically has warehouses all over the United States and grabs medical equipment, puts them in these warehouses, and then we work with the Ukrainian hospitals to identify things that they want, things that they have. We match that inventory list. Then we raise money to pay for the transportation. Project Cure gives us the stuff. We do all of the assessments and reporting. Then we deliver it. And they get all of this equipment for free. And we've delivered millions of dollars worth of hospital equipment to several hospitals throughout Ukraine. I mean, before we even give anything to a hospital, we go to the hospital, we talk to the doctors, we talk to the directors, we talk to the administrators, we have them open every door. We want to see what it is they have and what they need. And then we sit down with them and say, okay, we're not going to give you landfill. We are going to give you things you need. So give us a list. We'll go back to Project Cure. We'll talk to them about what they have, and we'll make sure that we marry the list. Now, in this last container we delivered in February, they couldn't find the things that were on this particular hospital's need list. But then Project Cure said, hey, we have these brand new, well, not brand new, but almost like new, they were fabulous ICU beds. And these beds run, $10,000, $15,000 each. So we sent the list of these beds, and we ended up delivering 44 ICU beds to this hospital, this children's hospital in Kryvyi. And they were just like, they were crying. I mean, they were literally in tears when we delivered these things, because when we did the assessment, and the pictures I'll send them to you if you're interested. But I mean, some of the 5 kids to a bed, to a hospital room, and they're on these cast iron beds. I mean, it's something out of the 40s. It's unimaginable that today that hospitals are in such need. I mean, as a 501c3 charity, right? We are. Oh, by the way, I should mention we're a 501c3 charity in out of Washington D.C., and we're also a registered NGO charity in Ukraine. So we have registered sisters, if you will, in Ukraine as well as the United States. So we buy the goods here. There's no tax on it because we're a charity. We just fill out the appropriate customs forms on the Polish side and the Ukrainian side. And of course, they track all of the information. It's very, very rigorous. It takes us an entire day, actually, just to get the paperwork done, because, you fill out the forms, they come out and inspect the vehicle, they check the VIN number, they go through the vehicle to make sure that all of, it's what you say it is, that there's nothing in it. Before you actually bring it to the border and cross, because there's a very bureaucratic process. I understand the necessity for that, but it does take us about a day and a half to get over the border, just before we get to the border, to cross the border to go through into Ukraine.
And is there anything that the Ukrainian government could be doing to help streamline this process from bringing aid from Poland into Ukraine?
I'd like to see the Ukrainians on the Ukraine side have an expedited process for us. We have the global. I'm having a senior minute here. The global
entry.
Global entry. Excuse me. Global entry.
No, you're good.
So global entry, right? You go through a process, right? You get interviewed, you fill out the paperwork, they do a background check. You're a trusted traveler. So to some degree, I've been trying to get the Ukrainians to figure out how they have a trusted travelers program, so that we can expedite the system, and that we can go to various locations on the Polish border, because we only go through Poland at this point. It's just logistically easier for us, just for 100 reasons. But bottom line is that it takes us anywhere between 2 and 5 hours to get across the border, and it would be better if it only took us an hour or less to get these things across. If everything is done in advance, maybe we could figure something out. If they had a trusted travelers program, we've been delivering 400 plus ambulances. They know us. I mean, the border people know us, but they still have to fill out the paperwork. One of the other things that I think Ukraine could utilize is a better system of managing the NGOs within Ukraine that are coming from not just the United States, but from wherever. And what I mean by that is, earlier you said, well, are you getting requests from different units or different people or different organizations? Well, yeah, I mean, if the Ukrainians would come up with a like the hospital, for instance. It's a great system at the local level when we're dealing with the hospitals. They tell us what we need, where it should go, and we kind of go over the inventory. If the Ukrainian government at the federal level would have a better system of telling the NGOs without mandating, I'm not saying that they mandate this, but saying, hey, listen, work with the TDF, work with the Ministry of Health, work with this, and this is the things that those people need. The TDF needs ambulances. The Ministry of Health need get widgets, whatever it is. The Veterans Affairs needs this particular thing, or whatever ministry. And of course, the Veterans Affairs is under the military now. But anyway, the bottom line is that if the Ukrainian government would do a little bit more, I think, organizational, strategic thinking in terms of how they could direct, or at least give us some indication as to how we could better integrate our work within Ukraine to provide a better supply chain management that gives asset allocation a higher priority to those who need it, I think that would be very helpful. And there's a lot of informal aid that goes across the border that's not necessarily done in a way that we do things.
Mhm.
Yeah, good people who want to do good things, they want to deliver one ambulance. Well, that's great, but to some degree, delivering one ambulance can take up a lot of time at the border for both the Poles and the Ukrainians, and then getting it out to. It is a very clunky system. And again, I'm not trying to limit the amount of help that comes into Ukraine because all of a sudden people have too much bureaucracy. That's the last thing we want is bureaucracy. But I think the Ukrainians could do a better job of telling us who to work with and how to work with them, and then also maybe telling some of those smaller kind of informal efforts, hey, you ought to work with this group that's doing this thing that helps these people, and it's right along the same lines of what you're doing already. And whether, again, it's ambulances or hospital work or mental wellness, I mean, it could be anything really. Our mission clearly is to deliver the ambulances and the aid that we're delivering, but we're also doing something that's also very, very important, and that's advocacy for Ukraine. And every one of these drivers, every one of these volunteers, when they come home, they become ambassadors for Ukraine because, one, they get to actually go to Ukraine, talk to the people that are getting the assistance, and understand what's going on. Because it's one thing to see it in the news, it's yet another thing to actually experience it and talk to the kindergarten teacher who, before the war, never thought she would be on a frontline medical unit, right? And I gave her this one TDF unit in Kryvyi. I can remember, like, it's one of those things that'll sit with me for the rest of my life. I had my own helmet, and she had no helmet, and I gave her my Kevlar helmet, and she was in tears over a helmet, and I'm like, and she's a kindergarten teacher, and so people are seeing this and they're taking it home, and those volunteers become real advocates. And so what we're doing a lot is educating people as to what is going on and the atrocities that are being committed by Putin's government and the Russian army or armed forces. The Russians have crap. I mean, believe me when I tell you, at the very beginning of the war, we were delivering our ambulances like literally up to the front lines, like within less than a kilometer. And we stopped doing that because it was just too dangerous. But when we did deliver to Kharkiv and we were within like less than a kilometer of the Russian border, and they had just liberated one of their bunkers, kind of we got a real close-up view of what the Russians were using for equipment. And I have to tell you, it's I can't swear over I don't want to swear, but it's crap, right? I mean, it is what it is. And they left their hats and their shirts and their jackets and their coats, tons of food. You've probably seen these packets, these ready-to-meal eat with a star on them. They're about yay big. I mean, thousands of these things were just sitting there. I mean, the first thing that the Russians do when they occupy an area is they steal as much food as they possibly can from the locals because they can't eat their own supplies. And they try to steal clothing, and they're using basically whatever they can find that's not theirs because it's of such poor quality. In fact, they've even started reissuing World War II steel helmets. I don't know if you've heard about that, but they call them Colpex. And if you Googled it, you'll see a video, this really unbelievable PR piece that they put together, the Russian government, about how they're taking this steel helmet and they're putting this Kevlar wrap over it and a brand new liner, and they're sending out the front lines, and it's as good as Kevlar, it just amazes me as to what they're doing to supply their troops and the kind of disinformation they're telling their own people.
I mean, there was a somewhat famous video that made the rounds earlier in the war that showed a Russian soldier breaking a brick by hitting it with a loaf of bread.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, I brought one of those things home. I'm just looking at it, and it's crazy. All right, so this is a Russian meal ready to eat. I got it in Kharkiv when I was there. It's like literally brand new. I mean, if you look at this thing, I've not even opened it. I don't even want to open it. It weighs a ton. I don't know what's in it. But I'll tell you what, there were thousands of these things just lying there. I mean, their shoes, their boots. And then when you went down into the bunker, it was like a World War I scene, right? They'd cut down trees to line the inner lining, and they were all sleeping on one, or actually technically two platforms that they'd built. There were two big platforms. It was probably like maybe 10 feet wide and 20 feet deep. And these two platforms were underground, and they would just sleep on top of these things. Unimaginable.
And below the platforms is probably just sitting water, right? I think I'd seen that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was about this far off the ground, the
Yeah.
first platform, and then it was like bunk beds, only just one big piece of plywood that they would just all sleep on. And then they used their winter coats to stuff. They didn't even like their jackets. They would go out and steal whatever they could possibly steal from the local community because it was better quality. And then they would take the stuff that they were wearing and they'd use it as insulation in between the wood trees that they had used to line the siding of the bunker.
And you've visited Ukraine dozens of times now. You've met with civilians and people in the military. How is the situation on the ground developing? How are the people feeling? What do they think about the future?
Yeah, so I've written extensively. I am a fellow at the German Marshall Fund, and I've written extensively about the war in the last 4 years. What I will say is that I am incredibly impressed about the unity that exists amongst Ukrainians at a grassroots level. That's not to say that there's not political discourse. There's serious political discourse, as there is here in the United States. But there is a common unity amongst the Ukrainians. And every time the Russians do stupid things, they're just actually, I think it has the opposite effect. The Ukrainians are so focused and they are so driven. There's no surrender. There's no capitulation. I mean, they are more driven now than I've seen them in a long time. There was a time, I'd say 2 years ago, when I saw a fatigue, but that fatigue turned into passion and resolve when the Russians started doing really, really stupid things like, you know, bombing and droning civilian infrastructure. And it's just unheard of, the atrocities that are taking place. And of course, what's going on the front lines. First thing that the Russians do when they enter an occupied town, what they destroy the schools. And they literally, I say they destroy the school, they break every window. If it's not nailed down that they can't steal, they break it. We've walked in, I can't tell you how many schools that I've walked into in these places that were liberated where every window was broken, the ceilings were destroyed. They can't use them, and because they want to re-educate. That's their thinking. They go into the cultural centers. In Ukraine, they have cultural centers where they have theaters and music and arts, and it's a center place for the entire community to go. They destroy that because they want to destroy the culture of the Ukrainians. They want to come in and teach them their culture. And then they go out and they hunt down the political elected officials. And I mean, literally, the mayor of Bucha had to hide for a month while the Russians occupied Bucha, and his story is amazing. But the bottom line is, they go into the city halls and they destroy the administrative buildings and the hospitals. And so it's a real atrocity. That story has yet to be really fully told. I think after this war is over and they really do, an analysis of the atrocities that the Russians have perpetrated on the Ukrainians, they're going to find some really, I mean, Bucha is only the tip of the iceberg. Believe me when I tell you, Bucha is not the only place where they're going to find some atrocities after the war is over when they have liberated the territory that the Russians currently occupy.
Yes, famously the mass graves and all kinds of other evidence of war crimes in
Yeah,
Bucha.
yeah. It's just it's really kind of scary to think about what's going to happen post-war because it's going to take generations, I mean, if ever, for this to heal from the Ukrainian perspective.
Do you see the situation changing in the near future?
I do. I do. I think the tide is not only turned, I think it's only going to get worse for Russia. We've been talking about this for more than a year now. I mean, literally 2 years almost, about how Russia is going to run out of money and how they're financially unable to support this war. I'm amazed that it's been this long, to be frank. I thought they would have gone, you think about the Soviet Union and spending more money on the military to the point where it just kind of imploded, right? And all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. I mean, I think that's a strong possibility. And believe me, there are places within Russia that could very easily create an entirely new nation because they don't want to be part of this war machine that Putin has created. And, people can only withstand a certain amount of pain. And as much as I think sometimes the Russians revel in pain, the type of pain they're now suffering, both not just financially, but personally with the losses. I mean, look, they're sending their people into a meat grinder. I have heard stories about how basically, the drone system in Ukraine is very individualized. I mean, one drone for one person, and the Ukrainians, they have enough drones to kill a lot of Russians, and the Russians have a lot of people, more than Ukraine. But, at the end of the day, if you're losing 10 people for every one Ukrainian, that math doesn't, last that long. And I'm thinking that that is going to come to a head sometime in the next 6 to 12 months. I honestly don't see this really going beyond next year. I really don't. I mean, worst case scenario, it ends next year. That's my prediction. I could be
Right.
wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it ends tomorrow, right? But I don't see this going beyond it. I don't think that they can afford it. I don't think Putin can make any more excuses or lies or deceive his people anymore. You can only hide the bodies so long. You can only cremate so many bodies at the front line. You can only hide the daughters and sons and husbands and wives so long from people that it becomes very visible and transparent as to what's really happening.
Just within the past, really just the past couple weeks, they're mass evacuating Crimea. There are Russian petrol stations that have no gas, and that was originally just in Crimea, and now it's spreading to other parts of Russia. And so the situation in this regard, the domestic situation in Russia was always manageable, maybe if you were in St. Petersburg or Moscow, but things are changing very quickly. Um, you have a lot of personal time with Ukrainians. If Putin comes, let's say tomorrow, and he says, the war is over, we're going to freeze the front on the lines where it is, do you think the Ukrainians would take that?
I think that they would probably have a ceasefire. I don't think the Ukrainians would ever agree to give up an inch of territory. Basically, what I'm saying is that, reading and seeing on the news about what's going on in Crimea, clearly there is a crisis going on there. If they're pulling resources, energy, people out of Crimea, that tells me that that could be a target. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if that could ultimately become a front. And then you could also see a peaceful resolution to places like Transnistria in Moldova, because if the resources stop going to Crimea, you can bet your bottom dollar they're going to stop going to places like Transnistria, and Transnistria isn't going to be able to survive by themselves without Russian support. So that might resolve itself, hopefully peacefully. And we need to start not kind of, we need to start resolving these frozen conflicts, whether they're in Transnistria or South Ossetia. There are places where the Russians have created chaos around the world, not just in Ukraine.
Yeah, and a lot of Europe is tired of it, especially in Romania, but especially in Georgia as well. There's protests there for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
When you plan to do another two deliveries this year, and then I'm assuming more in 2027 as well, have you thought about if there is an end to this war, what Ukraine Focus might be doing then?
we will be closing our doors. So look, when I started the charity, we have a board of directors, and we all agreed that this was something that was needed during the war. And then when the war was over, that there would be other charities that would take over. I didn't create this organization to like live in infinitum, right? It's not an organization that's going to change its mission. Our mission is to help Ukraine during this war, supply them with the things that they've been asking us for, specifically ambulances and hospital medical equipment. And when that's over, there will be other organizations that will fill in the needs that will change. And I have, that's not our responsibility at this point. I think that is the role and responsibility of other organizations that might be in a better place, that are somewhat doing it now. We get a lot of help from UCCA, which is the largest Ukrainian diaspora organization in the United States. And, they do a lot of work outside of what we do. They support us, but they support a lot of other organizations like this that are implementing partners. We are implementing. And so I think it's time for us to step aside and have that other assistance provided by organizations that are better suited and experts at that particular area of need. It's been 4 years. I have a great team. We have really, really passionate people. Nobody's making we're not becoming millionaires doing this by any stretch of the imagination. We're just passionate. We work 7 days a week. Literally 7 days a week. And you think about it, 7 hours ahead in Ukraine, and some of my donors are 3 hours behind. So, we're constantly, doing what we can to help Ukraine. We do the best we can under the circumstances. And again, like I said before, we're not out to build a huge organization. We just want to do as much as we possibly can with the resources that we have. And then when the situation changes, we can hand it over to those who are in better position to continue to help Ukraine.
Right. Brock, thank you again for coming on the podcast. This was extremely informative. I had a really good time. I can't thank you enough. I wish you the best of luck with your future missions. You guys are doing just an incredible job.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And thanks for your time. It's great to be on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks again.